coming to you from the party city of board gaming, Omaha, Nebraska. Welcome to the Out of the Dust podcast. I'm your host, Wallflower Bryce. Tied in with a popular recurring Out of the Dust geek list on Board Game Geek, the Out of the Dust podcast is a weekly podcast that is focused on re-exploring games we played that we hadn't previously played in a year or more. Why did the game get dusty? Why did you decide to dust it off? How does the game compare to how you remembered it? Are you likely to play it more often in the future? These are the questions that we're interested in examining on Out of the Dust. This week on the podcast, episode 41. On the Out of the Dust segment, I'll bring Colony out of the dust, and a contributor will dust off both Blue Moon City and Amun-Re. On the reaction segment, I continue the saga of the Game of Thrones card game Kickstarter. On the What I've Been Playing segment, I review Roll to the Top. On the Obscure Bryce game segment, I review Escape from 100 Billion BC. And we wrap up the episode by taking a look at game number 3 on my top 5 favorite Kickstarter countdown. I had a chance to bring Colony out of the dust recently. I last played it 1 year, 11 months, and 10 days ago when I learned it with my wife at PretzCon when I was on a play-to-win shelf. We didn't win it then, but it recently connected with me in a math trade, and I was happy to finally get it into my collection. Designed by Ted Alspach, Toru Hojo, and N2, Colony was originally published by Bezier Games in 2016. It's a tableau building game that has some mechanical similarities to another Bezier game, Favorite the Pharaoh, as Colony has players using dice combinations to unlock abilities for their tableau in an effort to achieve a certain plateau first. In Favorite the Pharaoh, it's rolling a certain number of dice the same way. In Colony, it's getting to a certain number of points. But there's an action selection mechanism in Colony that makes the game ultimately feel sufficiently different than Favorite the Pharaoh, so that I have both in my collection. Since we'd played it before, it was easy to get our new copy to the table. Both my wife and I are fans of engine building games, so I could see us playing this one fairly regularly down the road. Let's see what a contributor brought out of the dust. Chris McGowan, username Usana Chris, brought a couple of cool games out of the dust recently. To set these up, he writes, I ran a Cult of the Old series of game events at the end of April at a regional convention, Gaming Hoopla, that doubles as a fundraiser in the fight against cancer. I purposely selected some oldies but goodies that I thought the new-to-hobby gamers might enjoy experiencing. It worked, and all of my events were full. One of the games Chris got to the table this way was Blue Moon City, a Reiner Knizia resource conversion game published by Fantasy Flight in 2006. Chris last played it 6 years, 8 months, and 8 days ago and writes, I played this as a closer on day 1 of the Hoopla. The well-curated board game library that the Gaming Hoopla has allowed us to locate an hour-ish long game for 3 pretty quick. Blue Moon City is a race game where you turn in crystals to put a cube of yours in the obelisk. It was a close game, but one player had a huge turn near the end with a large crystal reward and surged ahead of us. Another game that Chris played at Gaming Hoopla was Amun-Re, another Reiner Knizia game. This one recently reprinted, but originally published by Super Meeple in 2003. This one is a very unique Egyptian-themed auction game, which would probably be more well-known if not for Knizia's more popular Ra. Chris last played it 2 years, 3 months, and 27 days ago, and currently rates it a 9 out of 10. He writes, this is one of my favorites. I just have very few circumstances where we have 5 players who want to play a Knizia auction game. I know, I should game in different circles, right? I opened up my Hoopla weekend teaching this game. I thought I was being smart by picking games that were in the game library. I knew this was the new version by Tasty Minstrel, but I did not know that there were no cool player aids in the new version. I also did not know that the rules changed the pyramid scoring, no longer scoring points for sets of pyramids, but rather find your lowest number of pyramid province and score 3 points per pyramid in that low province. Slight change, but I think I like it. The cards were not very friendly to me, and we had a newbie winner. Success. Thanks for the contributions, Chris. These are a couple of my favorite Knizia games myself, and if someone wanted to make the argument that Blue Moon City is his best game, I wouldn't contend the point. That's a really great game, and I'm glad Simon recently reprinted it. Reaction segment time. This week on the segment, the Game of Thrones card game Kickstarter Part 3. As you will recall, Part 2 ended with both the Indiegogo campaign and the second Kickstarter campaign being suspended. That happened on the 11th of May. The following Monday, local Connecticut news reported that Daniel and his wife, Alessandra, had been arrested on the same day that their 2 simultaneous campaigns were suspended and were now facing 4 criminal counts of risk of injury to a minor and second-degree threatening. Alessandra was released, but Daniel remained in jail with bail set at $25,000. A court date is set for June. The same local news report also included further details of the deplorable living conditions the children had been suffering under, including being without running water for 6 months. The report also mentioned that their home had been condemned as being unfit to live in. As a joke, I created and published a meme to a Facebook page that had sprung up to track and report on developments of this saga. The meme imagined Alessandra visiting Daniel in jail, telling him she had no place to live, and he telling her not to worry about it and to grab a pen to write down all the sweet new card abilities he'd come up with for his game while in jail. Sadly, it appeared that this exaggerated meme was actually pretty close to the mark because, incredibly, the very next day, a third Kickstarter campaign was launched. This time presumably from one of Alessandra's aliases, and this time in the guise of an app that also promised a physical card game called now Dragon's Eye, a combat card game inspired by Game of Thrones. The actual Game of Thrones character names had been replaced by generic substitutions, but all the basic same gameplay elements, including some weirdly specific abilities, were still there. Laughably, pics that claimed to be sketches of the proposed art were clearly taken from some random coloring book. There were absurd promises in the pledge levels, including a $99 pledge that included a real forged sword engraved with a dragon's eye emblem. Apparently, selling weapons is against Kickstarter standards, and many observers reported the campaign for that. But when Kickstarter suspended this third campaign a mere 14 hours after its launch, it was with the same impersonating other people justification they used to suspend the second campaign. Now, it's been over a week since that third campaign was shut down, and no new ones have popped up. Have Daniel and Alessandra finally taken the hint that no one wants their game regardless of how it is presented? And have they finally figured out that there are more important things that they should be worrying about? Perhaps, but I have an uneasy feeling that this is not the last we've heard of them. But, for now, the saga of the Game of Thrones card game appears to finally be at an end. This week on the What I Have Been Playing segment, I'm going to tell you about Roll to the Top, a roll-and-write game from designers Peter Joustra and Corday van Moorsel and publisher Koali. First published in 2018, Roll to the Top was initially a sleeper hit. There wasn't a whole lot of promotion or marketing for the game, and positive reviews were spread by word of mouth. A Kickstarter was launched for a second edition that replaced the score pad with a dozen different laminated boards for up to 5 players, though this is the sort of game that is easily playable by even more players, with multiple copies of the game. After Gone Sean Clever had been such a hit for me last year, I was on the lookout for cool roll-and-write games. The second edition Kickstarter was very affordable, so I backed it with confidence. I got my copy in the mail just a week ago, and I've already played it a dozen times. Here's how it works. Each player receives a board that depicts a notable structure of some kind, like a pyramid or the Eiffel Tower, divided into small stacked squares. Each turn, a player rolls some combination of a d4, d6, d8, d12, and or d20. Players may then use the rolled results to fill in squares on their board, but a square on the bottom must be filled in before any square above it, and a square filled in above a square already filled in must be the same value or higher. A sixth custom die tells the next player whether they should take away a die from the pool, add one, or swap one out. The player who manages to completely fill in their board first wins. And so players must constantly weigh the benefits of filling in squares right away and hoping for the right rolls later, or waiting for more desirable low numbers early and risking losing the titular race of rolling to the top. I've stated several times before how 2018 was the year of the roll-and-write renaissance, and Roll to the Top is just another example of that. It's quick, it's addicting, and it's fun. I won my first 10 games against my wife, but she kept coming back for more. I appreciate how this game does not rely on mindless use-what-you-roll mechanics. Deciding where to place numbers when is a meaningful decision, and it's very satisfying getting a late roll in the game that you could use better than anyone else because of the way you set up your board earlier. So I'm glad I backed this. This is going to be our go-to before-bed game for a while, or at least until the next great roll-and-write shows up in the mail. Obscure Bryce Game segment time. This week on the segment, I'm going to tell you about Escape from 100 Million BC, a cooperative adventure game published in 2017 by IDW and designed by Kevin Wilson of Arkham Horror fame. This is a good example of a game that, despite some decent marketing from IDW at the time, has completely flown under the radar since its release, and is currently averaging less than 10 logged plays a month on BGG. The theme of the game finds players stranded in the prehistoric past when their time machine breaks down. Here's how it works. Players must explore the board looking for the scattered parts of their time machine, recovering modern equipment so it doesn't cause paradox, escorting time refugees back to the rifts that deposited them, and avoiding dinosaurs while they do all this. Players accomplish this by spending move points on their turn to turn over new tiles in various environments that will be hiding time machine parts, scattered equipment, or hostile dinosaurs. Recovering and using the items and dealing with the dinosaurs in various ways requires Arkham Horror-esque skill checks. Various things will cause paradox during the game, including losing too much health and needing to be recovered yourself, and if the paradox track ever reaches a certain point, then the players lose. This might even happen after players have found all the necessary time machine parts, because equipment left in the equipment deck will add to the paradox track as well. But assuming players are able to avoid this disastrous ending, players will return to the present and consult a table, based upon how much paradox they wound up causing overall, to see what kind of ending they wind up with. Poor game performance might result in returning to a present ruled by sentient dinosaurs or spiders, while positive endings might involve returning to an unchanged present or a heroic welcome for successful adventuring in the past. I've had this game on my wishlist ever since its release, and wound up trading my copy of Founders of Gloomhaven for it, under the assumption that any game with a dinosaur on the cover would automatically be more fun than Founders of Gloomhaven. I was correct, and I've been enjoying my plays of this since acquiring it. The cooperative challenge isn't too difficult, and I haven't experienced much threat of losing a game yet, so I keep upping the difficulty of it. With that in mind, this is the sort of game that experienced gamers could get away with starting at one of the harder modes. A comparison to Arkham Horror is not an unfair one for this game because in many ways it does feel like a streamlined version of it, which is a good thing in my opinion. I like the occasional annual game of Arkham Horror, but it's not a game I want to play too frequently. Escape from 100 Million BC is more straightforward and doesn't risk overstaying its welcome. It's certainly a lot quicker to set up. This game manages to successfully capture the sense of discovery an adventure game should, and I particularly enjoy the various endings players get based upon their final score. It's not a deep game, but the balance of length and meaningful decision-making opportunities is well struck. Special abilities make each character feel different and lends to a satisfying replayability. I'm glad I traded for this, and the solo ability of the game makes me believe it won't get dusty anytime soon. IDW is a publisher that tends to overproduce their games, by which I mean in the sense that they make way more copies than they actually need. As a result, Escape from 100 Million BC has been on many online sales since its release, so anyone interested in checking it out themselves should have many future opportunities to do so at a good deal. We continue my top 5 favorite Kickstarters I've backed this week with number 3 on the list. Now, I love everything that Stonemaier Games has come out with, Viticulture, Euphoria, Scythe, but you know what my favorite Stonemaier game is? Between Two Cities, Stonemaier's 2015 release. I think it's an absolutely brilliant design and the very definition of elegant gameplay. The drafting is straightforward but offers meaningful decisions every single time those tiles come my way. Balancing building two cities with two partners that are trying to do the same thing is a great challenge. There's a little bit of negotiation in this game that I think works well, and defies the typical negotiation problems of domineering players. But my favorite part of this game is drafting the double-sized tiles. As an aspiring game designer, that's a little bit of design that I admire a lot. On the surface, it's such a simple thing. Let's include a draft for a couple of double-sized tiles. But what an impact those make on the game. It's marvelous. For a while, Seven Wonders and Samurai Spirit were the go-to